Masechet Baba Kama Daf Sadi Zayin. We mentioned the opinion of Rav, who rules that the halacha is that there's a distinction between animals and slaves. Regarding animals, if someone steals an animal and then it gets old and weak, so that is a physical change, and that thereby the robber acquires it, and therefore he has to pay according to the original value when he bought it, when he stole it. However, a slave, Rav thinks, is the same as land. Land, you cannot steal land. Even if the robber goes and starts making a claim to the land, but the land as an immovable object cannot transfer to the possession of the robber, and therefore he just gives back the land. And the same thing is true with a slave. Rav thinks a slave, Eved Kanani, has the same status of land, and therefore if the robber steals the slave and in the meantime he gets older and weaker, diminishes in value, nevertheless the robber never owns, gets transferred ownership of the slave, and therefore even though it gets older and weaker, he can simply give back the slave and says, here it is, here's the very item that you owned all along, I am simply returning it to you. Good. That's what we said is the opinion of Rav, and now we're going to ask a question about that. Did Rav really say that slaves are the same as land? Patur. Rav Daniel said in the name of Rav that someone that seizes the slave of his friend, and he takes the slave and he works that slave. He does a few hours of work for him. The guy who stole the slave does not have to pay for those hours of work. Now, if you think that a slave is like land, then why would he not have to do the work? He is using an item, a person that belongs to the original owner, and so he should have to pay for using something that belongs to the original owner. If you say that a slave is like movable property, then since he stole movable property and he uses it, he acquires it thereby, and since the robber acquires it, so then it makes sense that he does not have to pay for the usage of it, because the robber acquires the item. If you acquire an item, then you can use it. You only have to repay the value of what you stole. But if it's like land, in which case the robber does not acquire it, so then the robber is using an item that belongs to someone else and should have to pay rent for using it. So the answer is, we're talking about a case where the slave was not his regular work hours anyway. The slave was going to be sitting around and doing nothing no matter what. So the robber did not take away anything from the owner of the land, the owner of the slave. If it was during work hours and now he takes the slave and now the owner loses out on that work, and then yes, he would have to pay because he's taking the item, the slave of someone else during work hours. This would be exactly the same law as land. Ki hadishlach le Rabbi Abad lemari bar mor ba'amine merav huna hadar b'chaser chavero shelo midato sarich la'alot lo sachar o en sarich la'alot lo sachar v'shadchu le eno sarich la'alot lo sachar. This is the same as the question that was sent by Rabbi Abba to Mari bar mor, asking him to go and ask Rav Huna the following question: if someone dwells in someone else's courtyard without the knowledge and agreement of the owner of the courtyard, but the courtyard was empty anyway, so this is the case of Ze nehene v'ze lo chaser. The squatter is benefiting and the owner of the courtyard has no loss. So does he have to pay for that rent of dwelling there for that day, or does he not have to pay because the owner didn't lose out anything? And the answer was, you do not have to pay. Since you're not losing anything out, therefore the guy squatting does not have to pay. And the same thing therefore is true with the slave. If someone goes and grabs someone's slave and uses him on off hours, on day off, or in the nighttime when he's not working anyway, so that's why he doesn't have to pay. Hachi hashta, but then we challenge that. Wait a second, these two cases are not the same. Bishlamatam leman damar ben leman damar betad meyate bayatev nichale ben leman damar ushiya yukat sha'ar nichale. In the case of a home, a courtyard or a home that someone comes and lives in without permission, there it makes sense that he doesn't have to pay, because there's actually a benefit to the owner not to leave the house abandoned, empty. And there's two different opinions about what happens to a house when you leave it empty versus inhabited. One opinion says a house that's inhabited remains habitable. When someone's living there, then they're going to go around, they're going to fix things, right? This is loose, they're going to tighten it, they're going to straighten up. And so it's actually good for the house for someone to live there. Sometimes when people go away, they like to have someone who's a house sitter, right? Live in the house. I don't want it to be empty, and so that I can come back and everything's in place. And the other opinion is very similar. It just says from the opposite point of view, that according to the pasuk, if a city is left in desolation, the gate is smin unto ruin. When you leave something empty, when you come back, it doesn't stay the same, but everything decays, things are broken, and nothing works anymore. And so therefore, the first opinion says the house benefits by people living there. The second opinion says the house gets worse by people not living there. Okay, either way, the point is that it makes sense that the squatter should not have to pay. It was going to be empty anyway, and the owner is like, you know what, it's good, I'm happy at least somebody was there. But would a slave owner be happy that someone is using his slave and weakening the slave? I know it's his time off, right? But the point is he has some time off so that when it comes back to work, now he'll be stronger. And now if you work him the whole time, he comes back, he's all tired. So the owner would not want that. And the answer is, it actually is the same. Here also the owner of the slave wants the slave to be worked so that the slave will not be ruined by idleness. The idea here is that the more you work a slave, the more he'll work. If you give him some time off, the owner just has nothing for him to do, then he's going to get used to being idle and lazy, and actually will be a worse worker. So actually he'll be a better worker if he's worked more. Rav Yosef bar Chama havu takif abde de inashe temasik behu zuzeh ve'abdi behu melacha amar le Rabba bere mai tama abid mor hachi. Now that we solved that problem, we have a related story about the members of Rav Yosef bar Chama's house. They would go and seize slaves from people who owed them money, right? You owe me money, you're not paying me. You know, I'm going to go take your slave, work him for the day, and I'll use that as payment towards what you owe me. And now Rabbah, Rav Yosef's son, challenged his father and said, "My master, why are you acting like this? It seems to be wrong that you're going and stealing people's slaves." And the father answered, "I follow the opinion of Rav Nachman, who says a slave is not worth the bread that he puts in his stomach." In other words, slaves are lazy, they don't do anything anyway, and therefore I'm doing that person a favor by seizing his slave and putting him to work. So now it's good, he'll work more, and I'm not taking anything away from the owner, kind of like what we said over here. But the son answered, when Rav Nachman said that slaves are lazy, not worth the bread that they eat, that was only talking specifically about lazy slaves like Daru, who he never works, he doesn't do any work in the field, he goes to the tavern and dances and entertains people. So that kind of slave, all you do is feed him and he does nothing. So that kind of slave is not worth the bread that he eats. That kind, yeah, it would be good if someone seized him and worked him. However, are all slaves like that? Most slaves, they do a lot of work, and therefore you are detracting from these people by seizing their slaves. Amar le ana kerav Daniel sebirali damarav Daniel barav katina amar Rav hatokef ba'abdo shel chavero v'asabo melacha patur al manicha le dela listere abde. So he answered, "Oh, you know what? Okay, if I don't follow Rav Nachman, I follow this ruling of Rav that we started with, that someone seizes a slave of his friend, and puts him to work, he does not have to pay. Why? Because it must be that the owner is happy that the slave is not losing his work ethic, and he's good at getting put to work more, and now he'll be work even harder when he comes back. So it must be that's I'm following that, and that must be his reasoning. So yeah, I'm doing a guy a favor by seizing his slave, so they won't mind, and he owes me money anyway. So the son says, actually, Rav's you can only apply Rav's ruling if when the owner of the slaves does not owe money to the guy seizing the slave. But in your case, father, master, since the guy owes you money and now you're taking his slave and using it, this looks like ribit. You can't, this is a important halakha. If someone owes you money, you can't get favors from them, because those favors are, even if they're not actual money that you're adding, 10% to the loan, but those favors he's giving you, it seems that he's doing those favors specifically because he owes you money. So this is a form of ribit, or at least looks like ribit, even if you're deducting that amount, so it's not technically ribit, and even if the guy's not losing anything, so it's not technically ribit, still doesn't matter. This looks like ribit and should not be allowed. Tamar Rav Yosef bar Yomi amar Rav Nachman, af al pi she'amru hada b'chaser chavero shelo mida'ato en tzarich la'alot lo sachar, hevar v'da b'chaser chavero tzarich la'alot lo sachar. And we have the same law regarding living in someone's house, even though we say the law in general is that someone is living in your courtyard without permission. You don't have to pay, right? Because the squatter gets benefit. The owner wasn't renting out that room anyway, and so he has no loss. Nevertheless, if the squatter lent money to the owner of the house, and then he's coming and living in it, this is a problem, because if he just lives there for free, then it looks like he's getting benefit from squatting, right? Since you owe me money, in the meantime I'll get extra benefit of living here, and you're not going to charge me. Well, that's the beat, and therefore in that case the squatter, since he's owed money, has to pay for the rental value for staying there, and therefore the same thing would be true in your case, Dad. Right, since these people owe you money, you cannot rely on the ruling of Rav, because now you're using their slave while they owe you money, and this looks like interest. Amar le hadribi, and the father said, "You're right. I changed my mind. I will no longer act in that way." Itemar, hatokef sefinato shel chavero v'asa ba melacha. Amar Rav rasa sechara notel, rasa pehata notel. Ushmel amar eno notel ela pehata. Someone goes and seizes someone else's boat, and he uses it for work. He goes and uses it to move some items and makes money off of it. So now he stole it, so he has to pay. How much does he have to pay? Rav says the owner of the boat can decide the higher of the following two values. Either the rental value, there's a normal rental value, it's on the side of the boat. Anybody wants to rent this boat, $100 a day. So either that, or if the owner of the boat wants, he can collect the diminishment, the wear and tear of the boat for it being used for the day. Whichever is more, he can decide. However, Shemuel says, no, the owner of the boat can only take the wear and tear, the amount by which it is diminished. So there's machloket here. But now we're going to give two explanations that actually there's no machloket. They're talking about two different cases. Papa says that Rav's statement was talking about where it's a rental boat. It's the owner rents it, normally rents it out, and therefore you have a choice to pay the rental value, or, like a stolen item, you pay the diminishment in value, so the owner can decide which one. Whereas when Shemuel said, no, he can only collect the diminishment value, that's because it's not a rental boat. It's not usually rented out. This is this guy's own boat. He used it himself. And now you stole it, so now you can't collect the rental value. You can only collect the diminishment value. Or you can explain the machloket that both are talking about where it's a rental boat. And Rav says, Rav's ruling was in a case where the robber, Caesar, he had intention as to be a renter, even though he didn't ask permission. But nevertheless, he said, "Oh, he saw the rental sign, $100." So he says, "Yeah, I'll be a renter," and he goes and takes the boat. In that case, the owner can say, it's up to the owner to decide either to say, "Oh, you know what, pay the rental value," or because you took it without permission, you're a thief, so pay the value of diminishment. Whereas Shemuel was talking about a case where the one who seized it, his intention was to be a robber, not to be a renter, and therefore the rental value is off the table. He only pays the amount of diminishment. The next part of the Mishnah said, Gazal matbeya v'nistak. If a robber steals a coin and then it cracks, so now it's not has little value, so he has to pay according to the time that he stole it, because now it changed, so he acquires it. And the same would be true if he stole fruit and they got rotten, or wine and it became vinegar. So he stole the item, it underwent a physical change, it's ruined, so he acquires the item and he has to pay the original value. This is in contrast to if he steals a coin and then it goes out of circulation, the government invalidates it. The coin is still there, it's intact, but the value. It's true, the value goes down, but not because of a physical change. That would be the same as terumah that becomes tameh. Also, the physical thing is here, but just legally now it can't be eaten by a kohen, or chametz, that now after Pesach that cannot be bought or sold. In all these cases, since it was only a legal change, but the item remains physically the same, the owner does not acquire, the robber does not acquire it. Instead, it belongs to the owner the whole time, and the robber can return it as is, even though it's worth less now. So this case of coin, there's two interpretations. Amar Rav Huna, nistak mamash, nifsal pesalatu malchut. Rav Huna is explaining the way we explained it until now, that nistak, the first case in the Mishnah, is where it gets cracked. That's literally cracked, so it's definitely no good. He has to pay the original value. And nifsal means if the government took it out of circulation, and so now you can't use it as currency anymore, so it didn't undergo a physical change, but a legal change. That's how Rav Huna understands it. But Rav Yehuda Amar, Pesalatu malchut name hainu nistak, says if the government takes out of circulation, that's the same as it being cracked. In both of those cases, now it's worthless. So you have to pay according to the value of the coin when it was whole and in currency. At the time of the robbery, that's how much you have to pay. That's what Rav Yehuda says. If so, so what's the second case of the Mishnah of an invalidated coin? That's talking about a case where it only got invalidated in one country, but it's still okay in another country. So if the first case was where the government that issues this coin takes it out of circulation, so no one will take it in the world, then it's totally no good. But in the second case, it's somewhat good. Sometimes there's an alliance between two provinces, and so they'll recognize each other's currency. And then there's a change. Now there's a war between them, or there's a trade tariff. And so one government says, well, you're no longer allowed to use. We're not recognizing that currency. Okay, yeah, but this currency still does have value in the other place. So therefore, you can't say that it has no value anymore. It's just not going to be less convenient because you have it over here. It's not recognized in the place that you are, but only in the other place. So in that case, that the currency remains has some value somewhere, and therefore the robber does not keep it, does not get ownership of it, and he can return it as is. Okay, we're going to have a challenge first to Rav Huna and then to Rav Yehuda. Amar le Rav Chisda le Rav Huna. The first opinion. Le didach d'amat nifsal pesalatu malchut hare perot v'rkibu yain v'chemis techi pesalatu malchut tameh v'katani mishalim kishat hagezela. Rav Chisda asked Rav Huna, according to you, you said nifsal means that the government canceled out, took this out of currency. And in that case, it doesn't matter since it's physically the same. So the robber doesn't take ownership of it, and he can return it as is. Well, yeah, but this case should be the same as a fruit that went rotten and wine that went bad, because in all these cases it can't be used anymore. So they should be equivalent to the case of the coin that went out of circulation, and yet. For those two, it says that he has to pay from the amount of the fruit at the time that he stole it. And here, in the case of the coin, he can return as is. Why? What's the difference between them? And Rav Huna answers simply, Amar lehatam nishtana ta'amo v'recho, hacha lo nishtana. In the case of the fruit and the wine, they undergo a physical change. They taste different, they smell different, they're no good. There's an actual change, a physical change in the item. Whereas here, the coin has no physical change. It's exactly the same molecule for molecule as it was at the time of the robbery, and therefore it's only the legal change that some government said is not usable anymore. The robber says, I don't have to deal with that. Here's the item; it's intact. I'm returning it as is. Amar Rav Yehuda, לדדחת אמרת פסלתו מלכות נמה היינו נסתק, הרי תרומה ונטמאת, דכי פסלתו מלכות נמה, וקטני אומר לו, הרי שלך לפניך. According to your opinion, that if a coin goes out of circulation by the whole government, then that's the same as it being broken, because now you can't use it anymore. Well, isn't that the same scenario as teruma that becomes tameh, right? It's the same as if the government says it's no good, so now you can't use it anymore. Still, you have the same thing here. You have teruma, and now it's tameh. Therefore, the halacha says you cannot eat it anymore. So the law of the two should be the same. Yet, teruma v'nitmet is in the second category where we say it's physically the same, so return it as is. Why isn't the law regarding a coin that goes out of circulation by the whole government, why isn't that the same? In the case of the produce that teruma that becomes tameh, the ruin is not noticeable. No one can see if something is tahor and tameh. All you see is a pile of grapes, and there's no way to know by looking at them if they're tahor and tameh, and therefore they're the same exact physical item, totally unnoticeable, undistinguishable from what it was before, so it's only a halachic change that now is tameh. Whereas for the coin, it is evident. Even though you're right, it's the same coin, it doesn't undergo any physical change, but now that the government said this coin can no longer be used, so now everyone shifted over to the other coins that can be used, and this coin, everyone got rid of it. If you show up to a store with it, everybody will say, oh, that's an invalid coin. So it is noticeable, it's distinguishable, right? Everybody knows this is on the list of bad coins, and so there is a noticeable difference here, and that's why Rav Yehuda says this is part of the first category, where the robber acquires it and he has to pay the value, unlike for teruma that becomes tameh, which is indistinguishable, and therefore he can return it as is. Itmar hamalveh et chavero al hamatbeya v'nifsal hamatbeya. Someone lends someone else money with a certain currency, and then that currency is canceled. Let's say, for example, imagine that before Brexit in England, they used the euro like the rest of Europe. And then they switched, and now they use the pound. So let's say someone lends someone else money before Brexit, when in an imaginary situation, they used the euro. And then England said, no more using euro here. So now, how does he pay back the loan? Rav Amar noter lo matbeh yoseh be'ota sha'ah. Rav says you have to use a new currency, and he pays him back in the equivalent amount of British pound, and not in euro anymore. Shmuel says, listen, you lent me in euro, I'm paying you back in euro. I know they don't accept euro around here in England anymore, but go use it in Meshan. Go use it in France, where it's still in currency. אמר רב נחמן, מסתברה מילתא דשמואל דאית לאורחה למזל למשן, אבל לית לאורחה לה. Rav Nachman says, I agree with Shemuel, it makes sense. if he has a way to get to Meshan. But if he doesn't have a way to get to Meshan, then not. In our example, if this guy normally goes to France, so then that's fine. You can pay him back in euro, and he'll use it over there. So it's still a fine currency for him. But if he doesn't go to France, he has no way of getting there, then he cannot pay him back in euros. He has to pay him back in British pounds. Iti be'rava Rav Nachman en mechalelin al ha'ma'ot she'enam yotzeot kesad. So Rava is going to challenge Rav Nachman's distinction here between having a way to get there or not. And it's from a baraita regarding Maaser Sheni. You cannot Maaser Sheni, a fruit that you have to take to Jerusalem, but if you're far away, it's very heavy to carry, then you can transfer the holiness onto coins. The baraita teaches that you cannot transfer holiness of Maaser Sheni to coins that are not in circulation. Kesad, and the Baraita gives examples. Hayulamaot kozbiyot, Yerushalmiyot, Oshem Malachim Rishonim, and Mechalelin. Ha Shelachronim, Dumyad Rishonim, Mechalelin. If you had coins from Kozbiyot, is from Bar Kochva. His name was Bar Kusba, his original name. But Rabbi Akiva and others thought he was Mashiach and called him Bar Kochva, son of the star, meaning the leader. And then it turns out he wasn't, so they called him Bar Koziba, the son of a liar. Anyway, while during the Bar Kochva revolt for a couple of years, he coined his own coins, and these were in circulation. But after the Romans came and destroyed him, then the Romans said, that's it, you cannot use these coins anymore. We still have some of these coins, very beautiful. He put a hechal and Bet HaMikdash on one side, and etrog here, and lulav. This is a lulav holder, a big wicker one, with one lulav, one arava, one hadas, which happens to be the opinion of Rabbi Akiva in the Mishnah, and he has his name around the side, Shimon, and the year, Shana Aleph, and was Shana Bet of his revolt, but there's no Shana Gimel. So if someone wants to use such a coin, after the Bar Kochva revolt to redeem his Maaser Sheni, you cannot do so. Or Jerusalem coins seems to refer to coins that were stamped during the Great Revolt against the Romans for Jerusalem back in 70. Or earlier coins from old dynasties of kings that are found but no longer in circulation. You cannot do so. That's the end of the Braita. Now we're going to infer from this that if it's later coins, that are similar to the older coins. In other words, if they're coins that are current, but now, just now the government said we're not going to recognize those coins anymore, then you can use them, right? In other words, in our example, if is a euro that's good somewhere else, but just the government over here said you can't use euro anymore, then that would be okay. Only if it's an ancient coin that no one uses, then you can't use it. But if somebody uses it, then it would be okay. But this is a challenge because this makes no distinction between whether you can get there or not. It sounds like it's always okay. And over here it says, no, if you can't get to France, if you can't get to Meshan, then it's not, then you cannot use it as a substitute for paying back the loan. And the answer is, this Baraita here that says that you can use it for Maaser Sheni is talking about a case where the governments are not particular with each other. Let's see an example of Britain and France where they say, yeah, you can come and go. You want to take euros there, that's fine. You want to bring some pounds back, that's fine. The border, they allow, you can declare it, you can bring it in. So then it's easy to come and go. That's why it's permitted to use that for Maaser Sheni. Ela ki amar Shemuel keshe malchuyot makpidot zo al zo. So that means that the Shemuel's law, according to Rav Nachman, is Nachman's interpretation is where the kingdoms are particular and don't allow you to take the currency back and forth. Then then how can he bring it back and forth? Rav Nachman's whole distinction was, well, if you normally go back and forth, then that's fine. But you're saying that this is only a case where they are particular. If they are particular, they're going to stop you. then there's no way to bring it back and forth. So the answer is demamti la al yedeh hadachak de la bachshi v'mashkechi kabdi. No, we're talking about a case where the government you can still bring it with difficulty because the government does not search. They don't check, right? You put it on the bottom of your suitcase, and they're not going to check. If they do happen to check, then they will confiscate it. But usually they don't, and therefore you can sneak it in pretty easily. With some difficulty, but you can get it there. It's not like they're really checking so much. Tashema en mechalin al ma'ot shel kan vehen bebavel v'shel bavel vehen kan shel bavel vehen bebavel mechalidin. Another question against Shemuel's opinion. We have a baraita that says you cannot redeem a transfer holiness of Maaseh Sheni fruit to money on that of here. The Baraitot are written in Eretz Yisrael. So kan means in Eretz Yisrael. So money of Eretz Yisrael, if the owner is in Bavel, it doesn't matter where the fruit is. You don't have to be with the fruit to do this. So if the owner is in Bavel, then he can't use Eretz Yisrael money in Bavel, wrong currency. And similarly, if he's in Israel, he can't use Babylonian money. There was a dividing line between the Roman Empire and the Persian Empire. So he's using currency from the Persian Empire while he's in Israel, which is under the Roman Empire. No good. And furthermore, however, if he's in Bavel and he's using Babylonian currency, that's okay. Now, what can we learn from this? Katane mihat en mechalilin al ma'ot shel kan vehen bebavel. Afagav desofol mesek lehatam. The Braita said that you cannot use money of Israel while you're in Bavel to redeem the fruit. But why not? If you're in Bavel and you redeem the money with Israel with money of Israel, eventually, what are you going to do with that money? Well, you have to bring it to Jerusalem, right? That's the law. You have to go and consume it in Eretz Yisrael. So for sure, you're going to come. So that should be, according to Shemuel, since you are going to go to that place, then you should be allowed to redeem, even though it's the wrong currency of that country, because you're eventually going to go to that country. So this should be. This is fine over here. A challenge to Shemuel, and the answer is Hacha Maskinan Kishemalchuyot Makpidot Zo Al Zo. This baraita is where the kingdoms are very particular, and they don't allow, and they check your luggage, and they don't allow any currency to go in and out. And therefore, if you're gonna take your produce, if you're gonna redeem your produce while you're in Bavel with Israeli money, with money from the Roman Empire, and there's no way that they're gonna let you in with it, so then you can't do that because you can't get it there. Well, if so, what about the case of Babylonian money while you're in Bavel? And that the Baraita says is allowed. But what are you going to do with it? You just said that there's no way to bring it to Eretz Yisrael because the governments are very particular. And the answer is no, you can always use that money to buy an animal, and then the animal you can bring to Jerusalem. And so since you can still use the money, redeem that money with an animal and bring it, so there is a way to use it. We now have a question on the Braita itself that said when you're in Eretz Yisrael, you cannot use Babylonian money. But this Baraita says that the rabbis made a takana that you can use any money in circulation when you're in Jerusalem, for precisely for this reason, because we know people are coming from all over the world, all different countries on pilgrimage, and they're bringing their currencies from all different places. So we made takana that we accept all currencies in Yerushalayim. So if I'm using Babylonian currency in Jerusalem, then it should be permitted. So how come the Baraita before it said it's not permitted, but according to this, it should be permitted? Amar Rabbi Zera la kashya, kan bizman sheyad Yisrael tekefa al umot haolam, kan bizman sheyad umot haolam tekefa al asman. This depends. The Baraita that said all money is valid in Jerusalem, that's when the hand of the Jews is overpowering, is dominant over the power of the other world powers. In other words, when Israel is in charge and has independence over the land, so then they can make such a declaration. It says, listen, anyone who you want to come and bring currency from wherever you are. You're allowed to bring it and you can use it. However, the previous Braita was talking about when we're under foreign rule, uses Lashon Sagi Nahor, when the foreigners are in control of themselves. It means not only of themselves, but also over the Jews. And then they will not allow foreign currency to come in and will not allow it to be used in Jerusalem. Well, if they don't allow it to be used, then we can't allow a person to redeem their produce in Eretz Yisrael with currency from Bavel, because you can't use it and it's out of our hands. If it's out of our hands, you can't do it. If it is in our power, then you can. Tanot Rabbanan, Ezu Matbeah Shel Yerushalayim. What is this coin of Jerusalem that Baraita mentioned? David Shlomo misad echad v'Yerushalayim ir hakodesh misad acher. It's a coin from ancient Jerusalem that was established by David and Shlomo, and therefore it has the names of David and Shlomo on one side, and Yerushalayim, ir hakodesh, the holy city, on the other side. So showing the holiness of Yerushalayim and giving acknowledgement to David and Shlomo as its founders. Ve'zehu matbeah shel Abraham Avinu zakenu. And what is the coin of Abraham Avinu? We didn't mention it, but there's such a coin. So what is this coin? You have an old man and an old woman on one side, and the young man and young woman on the other side. The older couple represents Abraham and Sarah, and the younger couple representing Yitzhak and Rivka. What a beautiful coin, representing the transmission of generations, right, from one to the next. That what one generation is the other side of the coin of what they pass on to the next generation, and both need each other. The older need the younger to pass on to, and the younger need the older to teach them their ways. And so this is what Abraham is all about, not just to be great himself, but to pass on his values and the berit and tzedakah mishpat to the next generation. What a beautiful coin. I hope we find one day. Let's say I lent you 10 coins of a certain denomination, and then the government decided that they're going to enlarge the coins. Since from now on, when you make this coin, you have to put 10% more silver on it. So now, how am I going to pay back? And the answer of Rav Chisda is that you have to pay the new coin, whatever it is, right? Even though you paid 10 of the old coin that was smaller, now they changed it, so you still have to pay 10 of the same coin, and now it's bigger. And he asked him, even if it's a lot bigger, as large as a sieve, yes, even that big. Not just if it's a sliver bigger, if it's a lot bigger. Even if it's as big as a quarter cup, even if it's gigantic, yes, whatever they make the new coin, if that's the same denomination coin, but they made it bigger, well, you have to pay with that. Yeah, but this doesn't make sense, because now that you're using a bigger coin, the price of the produce will go down. Not that the price of the produce actually went down, but now the coin, since it has more metal in it, more silver, is worth more. And so this is going to be a problem of ribit, of interest, right? I gave you 10 small coins, you're giving back 10 big coins, and you can use those 10 big coins to buy a lot more. So this should be prohibited. So we have to look. If the decrease in price of the produce is in fact because the weight of the coin is more, then we're going to have to reduce the amount that is paid by the coins, right? Then, in fact, that would be the beat, and we're going to have to weigh out and just pay the same value, the same buying power, not the same number of coins, but we'll look at the buying power, the same amount of produce that it would buy. However, maybe the price of the fruit went down just because of the market fluctuation of the price of potatoes and apples. So then, in that case, it's not because the coin is different, but rather just the market price is different. Then you have to pay back the same number of coins, even though they're bigger. Okay, even if the prices did not change for the apples, because it's the apple market that changed, but otherwise the price is the same. The buying power is the same for fruit. Nevertheless, for the purpose of making a bar of metal, it's certainly different, right? Beforehand, you could take 100 coins to make a bar of metal. Now that the coins are bigger, I could take just 80 coins and make the same bar of metal. So this is going to be a problem of ribit. If I'm going to be paid back, I gave you 100 small coins and I get back 100 big coins. That is certainly worth. It's more metal, more silver. I could make more bars of metal out of it. Ela ki had Rav Papa Rav Huna bered Rav Yoshua Abdi Obada bezuzeh de'agad damis taya'a adasara bitman ya. Rather, must be that in such a case where I gave you, 10 small coins, well, we need a solution that Rav Papa and Rav Huna, the son of Yehuda, when they had an actual case like this regarding some guy named Agar Damis, the Arab merchant. And they originally had 10 coins, but then the currency changed, and they evaluated that 10 of the old coins is worth 8 of the new coins. And so in that case, even though originally he lent or offered a price of 10 coins, and then when the new coin came out, they said this is worth 8 coins. The same thing is the same. That would be the same halacha in our case. If I lent you 10 small coins, then you don't have to pay back 10 big coins. The halacha just meant that you have to pay back with big coins. But how many big coins is actually less. We go by the buying power, by the amount of silver in it, and therefore it could be that there will be only 8 coins that you have to pay back, and thereby we avoid any problem of ribit, and also we are paying back the fair amount. Baruch Adonai Leolam, Amen ve'amen.